Keep your head above water, making a wave when you can. If you grew up in the 70s, those lyrics weren't just a catchy opening theme, they were a heartbeat. They were the sound of the Evans family, James, Florida, JJ, Thelma, and Michael squeezing joy out of a concrete wasteland. We remember the laughter in that cramped apartment on the 17th floor. We remember the Dyn-o-mite screams that shook the rafters. For the first time, television showed us a black family that didn't just survive, they loved. But here's the thing about those good times. They were bought with blood, sweat, and a lot of hidden tears. Behind JJ's goofy grins and the colorful paintings on the wall, a war was raging for the very soul of the show. While you were laughing at the slapstick, the actors were fighting a desperate battle against stereotypes that felt like modern-day chains. A father figure, the moral backbone of Black America, was erased because he dared to ask for better writing. A mother's heart was broken as she watched her serious show turn into a caricature. I know it sounds heavy, right? But you can't talk about the Evans family without talking about the shadows of Cabrini-Green. Today, we're going back to 1974. We're peeling back the laughter to find the struggle for dignity that happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Grab your seat. This is the tragic, untold history of good times. Number 15. The Maude Connection. Before she was the matriarch of the projects, Florida Evans was a maid. She was the sharp-witted, no-nonsense housekeeper for Maude Findlay in suburban New York. Esther Rolle played the part with such quiet power that the audience demanded more. They wanted to see where Florida went when she finished cleaning Maude's house. They wanted to see her world. But here is the kicker. Moving Florida from the suburbs to the inner city of Chicago wasn't just a change of scenery. It was a gamble that terrified the network. When the spin-off was created, Esther Rolle made one demand that changed television history. She refused to do the show unless there was a strong present father figure. In the original scripts, Florida was a single mother. The absent black father was already a tired, damaging trope in 1974. Esther told the producers, "I will not contribute to the lie." Imagine for a second the tension in those early meetings. A black actress telling a room full of white executives that their vision of a broken family wasn't good enough. She won that battle, and James Evans was born. But as we'll see, that victory came with a price that would eventually tear the show apart. Florida's journey started with a fight for respect, and she would spend the next 6 years trying to keep that respect from slipping away. Number 14. Cabrini-Green. The real-life hell. When the show opens, you see those massive gray high-rises. You see the children playing on asphalt under the shadow of concrete giants. Those aren't movie sets. That is Cabrini-Green. In the 1970s, Cabrini-Green was the ultimate symbol of failed public housing in Chicago. It was a place of immense talent and community, but it was also a place of crushing poverty and escalating violence. Can you even picture the contrast? Inside the studio, the lights were bright, the jokes were rehearsed, and the projects were made of plywood and paint. But the actors knew the truth. They knew that the families living in the real 17th floor apartments were dealing with broken elevators, heatless winters, and the constant sound of sirens. The show's creator, Eric Monte, grew up in those buildings. He wanted the world to see the humanity inside the concrete. But Hollywood has a way of cleaning up reality. As the show became more successful, the grit of the real Cabrini-Green started to fade away, replaced by brighter colors and broader jokes. But for the people living there, the show was a bittersweet mirror. They saw their homes on national TV, but they also saw their struggles being turned into entertainment. Every time JJ made a joke about being hungry, there was a kid in the real Cabrini-Green who wasn't laughing, because for them, the hunger wasn't a punchline. It was life. The show sat on a foundation of real human suffering, a ghost of a building that eventually had to be torn down because it was too broken to save. Number 13. The Dyn-o-mite curse. If you close your eyes and think of good times, what's the first thing you hear? It's not a deep philosophical debate. It's a skinny kid in a floppy hat screaming, Dyn-o-mite! Jimmy Walker, who played the eldest son, JJ, didn't just become a star, he became a cultural hurricane. By the second season, his catchphrase was on T-shirts, lunchboxes, and every playground in America. For the network, this was a gold mine. For Jimmy Walker, it was a career-defining win. But for Esther, Rolle, and John Amos, it was a tragedy in the making. Imagine for a second being a serious actor who took a job because you wanted to show the world the dignity of a black family surviving against all odds. Then suddenly your serious drama is hijacked by a 17-year-old character who acts like a walking, talking cartoon. They felt that JJ was becoming a modern-day minstrel, a character designed to let white audiences laugh at him rather than with him. The tension on set was thick enough to cut with a knife. John Amos famously said that the show was too much JJ and not enough about the reality of the struggle. Every time the audience roared at that catchphrase, Esther and John felt the soul of the show slipping away. They weren't just jealous of the spotlight, they were terrified that the Dyn-o-mite fuse was going to blow up the very respect they had fought so hard to build. It's a classic Hollywood irony. The thing that made the show a hit was the very thing that broke the hearts of its leads. Number 12. The casting of James Evans. We've talked about Esther Rolle's ultimatum to have a father figure on the show. But the man they found to fill those shoes, John Amos, brought something to the role that nobody, not even the producers, expected. John Amos wasn't just playing a blue-collar father. He was that man. Before he was an actor, he had been a professional football player and worked various manual labor jobs. When he walked onto that set as James Evans, he brought a raw, muscular dignity that hadn't been seen on television before. But here's the thing. The writers didn't know how to handle a man like that. James Evans was the first black father on a sitcom who wasn't just a bumbling joke or a distant figure. He was a man who worked 3 jobs, a man who protected his kids, and a man who refused to take handouts. John Amos fought for every ounce of that character's strength. He would often challenge the scripts, arguing that a black man wouldn't say this, or a father wouldn't do that. I know it sounds like he was being difficult, right? But he was protecting a symbol. He knew that for millions of black children watching at home, James Evans was the only version of a present loving father they saw on screen. He felt the weight of an entire community on his shoulders. This wasn't just a sitcom for John Amos. It was a mission. And as we're about to see, that mission would eventually lead him into a head-on collision with the people who signed his paychecks. Number 11. The writer's room bias. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable secret behind the good times. Take a look at the Evans family. They are living in the heart of Black Chicago, dealing with the specific painful nuances of the inner-city experience. Now take a look at the room where their stories were being written. In the early years, the writer's room was almost entirely white. Can you even picture that a group of men who had never lived in the projects, never dealt with a slumlord, and never felt the sting of systemic racism in a ghetto trying to tell the story of a family that lived it every day? The disconnect was massive. Eric Monty, the show's creator and one of the few black voices in the room, was constantly at war with the other writers. He wanted grit. He wanted truth. He wanted the audience to feel the heat of the broken radiators. But the other writers and the network wanted sitcom funny. They wanted jokes that were safe and easy. This is why characters like JJ became so exaggerated. To a room of white writers, funny often meant falling back on old, tired stereotypes. They didn't see the tragedy in a 17th-floor apartment with a broken elevator. They saw a setting for a slapstick gag. This cultural gap created a thematic ghost that haunted every episode. The actors were essentially translating a white version of their lives into something that felt real, and the effort of that translation was exhausting. It's the secret reason why the show often felt like it was having an identity crisis, because it was being written by people who were looking at the projects through a telescope rather than a window. Number 10. Esther Rolle's silent protest. Esther Rolle was more than just an actress. She was the moral guardian of the Evans family. She had fought so hard to bring a strong, unified black family to the screen. But as the show progressed, she began to feel like she was losing her grip on the steering wheel. Imagine for a second being in Esther's shoes. You're sitting in the makeup chair, and you look at the script for the week. Instead of a story about Michael's education or Thelma's dreams, it's another 30 pages of JJ making goofy faces and shouting, "Dyn-o-mite!" She was heartbroken. She felt that the show's success was being built on the back of a stereotype she despised. Esther didn't just complain, she protested with her presence. In many episodes, you'll notice her character, Florida, looking particularly stern or quiet. That wasn't just acting. That was Esther Rolle's genuine disappointment leaking through the lens. She refused to laugh at the jokes she found offensive. She stayed for the children, for the millions of black kids watching who needed a mother figure, but she was a woman in mourning for the serious show she had been promised. It's a tragic internal conflict, staying in a job that feeds your family but starves your soul. Number 9. The firing of John Amos. This is the moment the good times turned cold. John Amos, the man who gave James Evans his thunderous voice and his unbreakable spine, was a man of principle. But in Hollywood, principle is often treated as a problem. John was increasingly vocal about the direction of the show. He wanted deeper storylines, more focus on the social issues of the day, and less on the clowning of JJ. But here's the thing. The producers, led by the legendary Norman Lear, had a different vision. They saw Jimmy Walker as the moneymaker. They saw JJ as the brand. And if you think a leading man is untouchable, wait until you hear this. During the break between seasons 3 and 4, John Amos got a phone call. It wasn't a negotiation, it wasn't a discussion, it was a termination. The producers decided that John was too difficult to work with. Can you even picture the shock of the cast? The anchor of the family. The first strong black father on a sitcom was being cut out like a cancer. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a power move. They wanted to show the cast who was really in charge. John Amos didn't leave because he wanted to. He was silenced because he dared to speak the truth. And as we're about to see, the way they handled his exit was nothing short of brutal. Number 8. The death of James Evans. How do you get rid of a man like James Evans? He was too strong to just walk out on his family. He was too loyal to just disappear. So the writers chose the most permanent solution possible. They killed him. But it wasn't the death itself that was tragic. It was the way the cast found out. They weren't told in advance. They found out when they received the script for the Season 4 premiere titled The Big Move. In the episode, the family is celebrating. They've finally found a way out of the projects. James is in Mississippi, having secured a good job and a home for them. The dream is finally within reach. But then a telegram arrives. James has been killed in a car accident. The reaction you see on screen from Florida, that raw, gut-wrenching grief, wasn't entirely scripted. Esther Rolle and the rest of the cast were mourning the loss of their friend and co-star in real time. The network had used a tragedy to solve a contract problem. The fans were devastated. To this day, the scene where Florida screams, "Damn, damn, damn," remains one of the most powerful moments in TV history. But behind that scream was the knowledge that the show had killed off its hero just to keep the clown in the spotlight. It was a cold-blooded move that many viewers felt the show never truly recovered from. The father was gone, and the projects suddenly felt a lot more permanent. Number 7. Janet Jackson's dark debut. By the 5th season, the apartment on the 17th floor was feeling a bit empty. The show needed a spark, a new heart to protect. And they found it in a tiny, wide-eyed girl named Penny, played by a very young Janet Jackson. But here's the things about Penny. Her introduction wasn't about Dyn-o-mite laughs or lighthearted fun. It was about a shadow that most sitcoms in 1977 were too afraid to touch. Penny's storyline was a brutal, groundbreaking look at child abuse. I know it sounds incredibly dark for a show with a laugh track, right? But the writers went there. We saw Penny being abandoned by her mother Millicent, who had physically abused her at one point, even burning the child with a hot iron. It was a visceral, painful arc that forced the Evans family to step up as protectors. For Janet Jackson, this was her first major acting role, and the pressure was immense. She wasn't just playing a cute kid. She was carrying the weight of a trauma that millions of children were facing in silence. This storyline did something remarkable. It shifted the show's tone back toward the social realism that Esther Rolle had always fought for. But it also served as a haunting reminder that even in a house filled with love, the monsters of the real world were always just a hallway away. Number 6. The empty chair. The chair at the head of the table was already empty after James was killed off. But in Season 5, the kitchen grew even more silent. Esther Rolle, the woman who had birthed the show with her own iron will, finally walked away. She didn't leave because she wanted a bigger paycheck or a movie career. She left because she couldn't bear to watch her child be humiliated any longer. She was disgusted by the way JJ had been turned into a chicken-eating, eye-rolling caricature. She felt that without James, the show had lost its moral compass, and she refused to be a part of the circus. Imagine for a second the atmosphere on that set. The mother was gone. The heart was cold. For an entire season, the show tried to survive without Florida Evans. They brought in a grandmother figure, but the chemistry was broken. The network eventually realized their mistake and begged Esther to come back for the final season, but the damage was done. When she finally returned, she looked tired. The fire that had defined Florida Evans in the early seasons had dimmed. It's the ultimate tragedy of Good Times. The actress fought so hard for a strong family, only to see the industry tear it apart piece by piece until she had nothing left to defend. Number 5. The fashion of Thelma. In the gray concrete world of the Cabrini-Green projects, color was a rare commodity. But then there was Thelma. Bernadette Stanis, who played the middle daughter, wasn't just a side character. She was a revolution in high-waisted jeans. But here's the aha moment. Thelma's style wasn't just a costume choice by the studio. Bernadette Stanis fought tooth and nail for her character's image. She knew that for black girls living in poverty across America, Thelma was their reflection. She insisted that Thelma be intelligent, poised, and stylish, even on a project budget. She wanted to show the world that living in a ghetto didn't mean you didn't have pride. It didn't mean you didn't have black girl magic before the term even existed. Thelma became the first black teenage girl, it girl, on television. She broke the stereotype that girls from the projects were just tough or loud. She was a poet, a student, and a fashion icon. But behind the scenes, Bernadette had to navigate a writer's room that didn't always know how to write for a young woman of her depth. She had to build Thelma's dignity herself, brick by brick, ensuring that while JJ was the clown, Thelma was the hope. Number 4. The Secret Painter. Throughout the series, JJ is portrayed as a talented artist. His paintings were vibrant, elongated, and filled with a rhythmic energy that seemed to dance off the canvas. They were the only thing that gave his character a sense of soul beyond the Dyn-o-mite catchphrase. But Jimmy Walker didn't paint those. The real man behind the brush was a legend named Ernie Barnes. And here's the aha moment. Ernie Barnes wasn't just a painter. He was a former professional football player. He brought a physical, muscular understanding of the human form to his art, a style he called neo-mannerism. Can you even picture that? Every time JJ unveiled a new masterpiece on screen, the audience was actually seeing the work of one of the greatest black artists of the 20th century. His most famous piece, The Sugar Shack, even appeared in the show's closing credits. But the tragedy is that for a long time, Barnes's genius was hidden behind JJ's comedy. The art was a silent protest, a reminder of the beauty and complexity of black life that the show's writers often ignored. Ernie Barnes gave JJ a dignity that the script tried to take away. Number 3. The 17th Floor Tragedy. For 6 years, the Evans family lived on the 17th floor of a Cabrini-Green high-rise. They worked multiple jobs, they studied hard, and they prayed. But they never seemed to get out. This wasn't just a plot point. It was a reflection of a systemic trap. In the 1970s, the American dream was often a closed door for families in the projects. James Evans worked himself to the bone, sometimes holding down 3 jobs at once, but the cost of living and the weight of the system kept them pinned to that apartment. I know it sounds like a downer, right? But the tragedy of Good Times is that it showed America a family that did everything right and still couldn't win. It exposed the lie that hard work is the only thing you need to succeed. The 17th floor wasn't just their home. It was a cage made of concrete and red tape. When you see James looking out the window at the Chicago skyline, he's not just looking at a view. He's looking at a world that refuses to let him in. Number 2. The rejection of the finale. In the final episode of the series, the Evans family finally gets their happy ending. They move out of the projects and into a new apartment in a better neighborhood. Florida is back, the kids are successful, and the struggle seems to be over. But for the cast, that ending felt like a lie. After years of grit, after the death of James, and after the show turned into a JJ caricature, the sudden happily ever after felt hollow. Esther, Rolle, and the other actors felt that it betrayed the reality of the people still living in Cabrini-Green. Imagine for a second being in that final scene. You're smiling for the cameras, but you know that in the real world the projects aren't that easy to escape. The finale was a fata morgana, a mirage created by the network to give the audience a warm, fuzzy feeling. It was a rejection of the show's original mission to tell the truth. The Evans family moved out, but the soul of the show had already left years before. Number 1. The legacy of scars. The greatest tragedy of Good Times is the toll it took on the people who built it. Esther, Rolle, and John Amos stood up for their community. They fought for dignity, for fatherhood, and for truth. And for their courage, they were labeled difficult and pushed out of the industry they loved. John Amos's career was derailed for years after his firing. Esther Rolle's health and spirit were drained by the constant battles with the writers. They were the heroes of the story, but they were treated like obstacles to a profit margin. But here is the thing: they won. They won because James Evans is still the blueprint for the strong black father on television. They won because Florida Evans is still the symbol of an unbreakable mother's love. They won because they refused to let their culture be turned into a punchline without a fight. Good Times left scars on everyone involved, but those scars are proof that they fought for something that mattered. The show changed television forever, not because it was funny, but because it was brave enough to show us the pain behind the punchline. Easy credit pulling us under, Good Times. The song still echoes through the halls of our memories. We remember the laughter, but now we see the struggle. We see a family that stood tall in a world that wanted them to bow. Good Times wasn't just a sitcom. It was a battlefield. It was a place where actors sacrificed their careers to protect the image of a family they truly believed in. It teaches us that even when the elevator is broken and the heat is off, you can still find warmth in the people you love. But it also leaves us with a question. In a world that still tries to turn people into caricatures, are we brave enough to stand up like Esther and John? Are we brave enough to keep our heads above water? Let me know your favorite Evans family moment in the comments. Did you love JJ's art? Or was James the father you always wished you had? I'll be there reading every single word.